Welcome all to Whispers in the Dark, where shadows breathe and forgotten voices stir. Step beyond the veil and lose yourself in a realm where reality fractures and nightmares whisper lullabies. Here we conjure true psychological thrillers, haunted tales, and horror stories that burrow deep beneath your skin and nestle in the quiet corners of your mind. Each story crackles like old film reels, unspooling secrets too heavy for daylight. Whether it's the slow unraveling of a fractured psyche or the cold caress of something unseen lurking just behind you, we promise narratives that will haunt you long after the final word is spoken. So get ready, dim the lights, slip on your headphones and listen closely for the whispers in the dark, and subscribe if you dare to return.
It started with that kind of heat that clings to your back like wet hands, thick and stifling. The kind of summer air that feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something awful to crawl out of the shadows. Eric found the house first. He always found things like that. Dangerous, stupid, half-whispered rumors wrapped in local legend. He told us about it while we sat outside the gas station, our shirts stuck to our skin, and our brains half melted from boredom. "It's out past the tree line," he said. "Been empty since the 90s. My cousin swears a cult lived there. Whole family vanished one night. No bodies, nothing. Just left their dinner on the table and disappeared." Jay laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "So what, you want to go check it out?" Eric nodded, grinning that wired grin he always got before doing something reckless. I said we should go during the day, but Eric insisted on sunset. "That's when it'll feel real," he said. The house was worse than I expected. Tall, rotting, sagging in the middle, like something inside was pressing down too hard. It sat behind a collapsed fence at the edge of the woods, half buried in vines and shadow. Even from the road, it looked wrong, like it had never belonged in this world. The windows were all dark, not broken, not dirty, just black, like mirrors turned inward. Eric kicked the gate open and led us in without hesitation. I followed because Jay did, and Jay followed because he didn't want to be left alone. The moment we stepped onto the porch, the air changed. It felt heavier, like walking underwater. Eric pushed open the door and the smell hit us. Wet wood, sour rot, and something sweet underneath it, like meat left too long in the sun. The inside was frozen in time, furniture still there, covered in dust. Thick cobwebs hung from the ceiling like forgotten thoughts. A photo hung crooked on the wall, mother, father, 2 kids, all smiling with their eyes just a little too wide. "Creepy," Eric muttered, shining his flashlight toward the staircase. That's when we heard it. Footsteps above us. 1 step. Pause. Another step. And then the sound of something heavy dragging slowly across the floor. I wanted to run. Jay did too. I could feel it in the way he hovered close behind me. But Eric was already moving, deeper into the house, drawn to it like something was calling him. We passed through the living room, where a broken baby carriage sat rusted to the floor, and into the kitchen, where the table was still set. Mold covered the plates, food fossilized into lumps of black and green. Eric opened the fridge and the smell nearly knocked us out, thick and rotten. But inside there was nothing except a dark smear across the bottom shelf, like something had crawled in there to die. The footsteps moved again, this time closer. "Down the stairs." Eric moved toward the sound. Jay grabbed his arm and said, "Don't be a dumbass." But Eric shook him off and started up the staircase. His flashlight jittered with every step, throwing shadows that twisted into shapes I couldn't quite name. We followed because being alone in that house was somehow worse. The upstairs hallway was narrow, lined with closed doors and peeling wallpaper that curled like old skin. Eric opened the first door and found a child's bedroom, small bed, busted dresser, and on the wall, words scrawled over and over in what looked like dried blood. "Let me out! Let me out! Let me out!" Jay backed up, whispering, "We shouldn't be here." But Eric was already opening the next door. A nursery. Crib overturned, toys shredded, stuffing soaked into the floor. The walls were covered in tiny black handprints, not painted, burned into the plaster. Then we saw the last door. It didn't belong. Too new. Solid wood. Brass handle polished like someone still used it. Eric opened it without hesitation and revealed a staircase leading down, much farther than the house should have gone. The air that came out was hot and wet, like breath from something ancient hiding in the dark. Eric stepped in. Jay and I followed, though every instinct in me screamed to run. The stairs felt endless, and at the bottom was a room that didn't make sense. Stone walls, slick with moisture, and a dirt floor broken by small, uneven mounds. In the center was a circle of tiny wooden chairs, all child-sized, all facing inward. Eric stood in the middle, spinning slowly, his light flickering like it was about to die. That's when we heard it, something crawling in the shadows, bent wrong, too many joints. It skittered along the wall, then stopped. A face appeared, but not a face. A blank mask of skin and eyes, too many eyes, all moving independently, watching us from every angle. Eric didn't scream. It moved fast, wrapped around him like smoke, and swallowed him whole. The light vanished. The air turned solid. Jay ran. I followed, tripping on the stairs, flashlight swinging behind us. I didn't look back. I couldn't. We burst out into the dying sunlight, the door slamming shut behind us with a quiet finality. The cops found nothing. No basement, no circle, no trace of Eric. Just rot, dust, and silence. I was 15 when I made the worst decision of my life, and all it took was a stupid dare and a dead gas station off Route 14 to ruin everything. It was one of those places that looked like it had never truly been alive. Grey concrete boards nailed haphazardly over the windows, rusted pumps out front like skeletal limbs reaching for something long gone. My older cousin Mike told me stories about it growing up. How old man Caro, who ran it, went nuts back in the early 2000s, locked himself in the stockroom for 3 days, and when the cops finally busted in, they found nothing. No body. No trace of him. Just blood in the freezer room, streaked like something had been dragged away sideways, and the word beneath carved into the wall with something that dulled halfway through. My friends didn't believe it, of course. Hell, I barely did. But when you're 15 and someone dares you to go inside a place like that alone, you go because fear doesn't weigh as much as humiliation. It was just after 10 p.m. when I biked out there, headlight flickering from bad batteries, crickets buzzing so loud it felt like they were warning me. I ditched the bike in the tall grass and climbed over the chain-link fence someone had tried to lock with a zip tie. The front doors were glass but shattered long ago and covered with plywood sheets that someone had pried loose enough for me to squeeze through. Inside was a darkness so thick it felt like a blanket over my eyes. I clicked on my flashlight and immediately wished I hadn't. Shelves rotting into themselves, old snack wrappers welded to the tile floor, and an overpowering stink of mildew, urine, and something faintly metallic, like rusted meat. I should have turned around right then. I should have run. But I remembered what Mike had said. Go to the back. Find the freezer door. Touch it. Prove you're not a chicken. So I moved forward, each step crunching softly as broken glass and gravel shifted under my sneakers. Something about the place didn't feel still. It felt waiting. I passed the dusty coolers, now empty coffins of old soda and beer, then the register counter, where the till sat pried open with black fingerprints smeared along the edge. The aisles narrowed toward the rear hallway, where a sign hung crooked from the ceiling that said, "Employees only." That's when I heard it. Just a little tap, 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 behind the wall to my right. Soft, deliberate, like fingers against drywall. I froze. My light trembled in my hand. I whispered, "Hello?" Because of course I did. And the tapping stopped for 3 long seconds. Then it started again, but now faster, and it was moving. Around the wall, behind the shelves, toward the hallway. I told myself it was a rat, maybe a raccoon. But I knew it wasn't. I stepped into the hallway, the light barely cutting through the dark now, dust particles thick as smoke. The freezer door was at the very end, steel streaked with old handprints, some smaller than mine. I got close enough to see that the word beneath was still carved there, just like the story said. But something had been added underneath, in jagged, newer letters. "It's hungry." I reached out to touch the door and felt an immediate chill through the metal, far too cold for a building that hadn't had power in years. Then the door creaked inward just a few inches by itself. I didn't open it further. I just stood there, holding my breath, when a sound came from within. Not a growl, not a voice, but something wet, like someone chewing behind a wall, too fast, too loud. My flashlight dimmed. The tapping was back now on the ceiling above me, tiny fast fingers skittering across tiles like something crawling upside down. I turned to leave and saw something at the far end of the hallway, just past the employee break room door. It was pale, bent, low to the ground, and wrong. I didn't see its face, just its hands, long and thin, fingers scraping the tile as it crawled forward, like it had no bones, and then it stopped, dead still, like it sensed my fear and was feeding on it. I could hear my own breathing, ragged, sharp, like I was already drowning. I ran so fast I slammed into the shelves in the main room, knocking down bags of ancient chips and plastic bottles that exploded on impact. The thing didn't scream. It didn't howl. It just followed, quietly, its limbs dragging in uneven rhythm. I got to the front and squeezed through the boards, ripping my hoodie on a nail, and burst into the night, gasping like I'd been underwater for hours. I didn't stop running until I was on my bike, pedaling like my soul depended on it. I didn't tell anyone what I saw, not even Mike. But that night I woke up to tapping on my bedroom window, 3 soft taps. Then nothing. Then a whisper, almost too quiet to hear, from the corner of the room behind me. "Still hungry?" I didn't turn around. I didn't move. The smell hit me next. Rusted meat and mold and something worse, something old. I closed my eyes and waited for it to go away. I don't think it ever did. I don't sleep anymore. Not really. I see the freezer door every time I dream. It started as a joke, a dumb idea we had during one of those dead-end summer nights when the heat never breaks and everything feels stuck in time. My friend Alex had been talking for weeks about the old Carlisle textile mill on the edge of town, the one they shut down after some kind of fire in the 2000s, 80s that no one really talked about anymore. People said it was cursed or haunted or something worse. There were stories about workers going missing long before the fire ever happened, and about strange noises heard in the walls. But we didn't believe any of it, of course. We were 17, bored and desperate for something to do. So when Alex dared me to go inside with him, I said yes without thinking, without really believing we'd find anything more than rats and asbestos. The building was massive, a looming black skeleton at the end of a forgotten road, 4 stories of cracked brick and broken windows, sagging like it had been holding its breath for 40 years. A rusted chain-link fence surrounded the property, but part of it had been torn down long ago, probably by other kids just as stupid as us. We crawled through as the sun dipped low behind the tree line, turning the sky a sick orange red that made everything look stained. We had 2 flashlights, half charged and flickering already, and the second we stepped inside, the air changed. It wasn't just colder. It was still like nothing had moved inside for decades, but something was still watching. Each step echoed in a way that didn't make sense, like the sound was coming back distorted from somewhere deeper underground. The first floor was what you'd expect. Old machines left to rust, broken furniture, papers scattered like they'd been dropped mid-evacuation. One of the filing cabinets had handprints on it, long greasy smears that didn't look old or faded, like someone had just touched it that day. We ignored it, of course, too proud to admit we were nervous. We joked, whispered dumb ghost stories to each other, pretended we weren't jumping at every creak and groan from the collapsing ceiling. Then we found the stairwell down to the sublevel. The door was steel, reinforced with a thick deadbolt that had been sheared clean off. Not cut, not rusted, just gone. Like something inside had forced its way out. Alex shined his light into the stairwell, and I swear to God the shadows moved away from it, like they were alive, and didn't like being seen. I told him we shouldn't go down there, but he just grinned at me like always and said, "What? Scared of the dark? I should have said yes. I should have walked out right then and left him behind. But I didn't. I followed him down. Each step felt wrong, like the angle was just slightly off, my foot landing a split second before I thought it would. And the deeper we went, the more the sound changed. Our footsteps stopped echoing at all, like the concrete was swallowing the noise. We reached the bottom and found ourselves in a massive room lined with thick pipes and huge machines that looked too advanced for a textile mill, tubes and valves and dials covered in mold and rust, none of it labeled, none of it making any sense. There was something on the floor, a trail, a thick black smear leading from one of the machines to a small door at the far end of the room. Alex followed it, like he was in a trance, and I begged him to stop, but my voice sounded small, like it didn't belong to me anymore. The closer we got to the door, the worse the smell got, like rotting meat and burnt plastic and something else, something chemical and bitter and ancient. Alex reached for the handle, and the second his fingers touched it, every light we had died. Flashlights, out, phone screens, dead. We were plunged into perfect, digesting black. It wasn't absence of light. It was presence of something else, something thick and watching. I heard Alex inhale sharply, then choke, then nothing. I called his name, once, twice, again and again. But the darkness swallowed my voice. I couldn't hear him anymore, not even breathing. And then I felt it beside me, not Alex, something else. Breathing slow and wet and loud, flesh shifting against flesh like it had too many limbs that didn't quite work together. I ran. I don't remember how I got back up the stairs. Everything was wrong, every corner too sharp, every hallway too long. I burst out of that building and into the woods, scraping my arms and legs raw on branches I couldn't see. I didn't stop until I hit pavement again. Alex never came out. They searched the mill for weeks. Dogs wouldn't go near the sublevel. Every camera they tried to use down there shorted out. Bodies? No one? Blood? No, but something took him, and whatever it was left me a souvenir. I found it in my room 3 nights later, under my bed. A strip of paper with Alex's handwriting on it. Just one sentence, scrawled in shaky ink over and over again. It watches from the walls. It watches from the walls. It watches from the walls. I burned it. I still see him in my dreams, his mouth open too wide, eyes pitch black, whispering things I don't remember when I wake up. We thought it'd be fun, a late-night thrill to break the monotony of our summer. Just four friends with flashlights and too much confidence sneaking into the old Wexler steel plant on the outskirts of town, that grey corpse of a building we'd all passed 100 times without really seeing it, just a relic with boarded windows and vines crawling up the rusted sides like veins over dead skin. Grant found a hole in the fence where someone else had clearly broken through before us, and we ducked inside one by one, laughing more than we should have, trying to act like this wasn't the dumbest idea we'd had all year. The factory was supposed to have shut down in '92 after some kind of scandal. Missing workers, vanishing payroll, midnight shifts that people clocked into but never came out from. But that all sounded like local myth, bloated over time, more small-town drama than horror. Still, as we crept through the busted side door and into the echoing dark, something about the air felt wrong, too dry, too thick, like the building was holding its breath. The first thing we noticed was the silence. Not the usual quiet of abandonment, but a total absence of sound, no crickets outside, no wind through the beams, just the mechanical hum of our own breath, and the occasional creak that always came from behind us but never repeated when we turned around. The flashlight beams cut through years of dust, illuminating shattered glass, twisted rebar, and old machines that looked like they hadn't just stopped but been ripped apart, some still stained with something dark and crusted over that wasn't rust. Maya tried to make a joke, something about tetanus spirits, and we all laughed nervously, but no one really smiled after that, because it felt like the shadows had moved closer, like they were listening to us and didn't appreciate the humor. The deeper we went, the colder it got, and not just in temperature but in feeling, like we were stepping into something ancient and angry that had been left to rot with the concrete and steel. We passed offices filled with overturned chairs, files shredded into piles that looked like nests, and walls scratched with deep grooves. Not letters, not words, just patterns like something with claws had tried to dig its way out or maybe in. Every so often we'd hear something faint, a knock, a dragging sound, a wet shuffle, but it always came from somewhere just out of sight, and every time we froze, held our breath, listened, then shook it off with forced laughter or a "must have been a raccoon." Then we found the stairwell leading to the lower levels, a heavy iron door that had been bent in the middle like something had pushed too hard from the inside. Jake hesitated then, but Grant just said, "Come on, it's probably a basement or furnace room," and started down without waiting for us. It was darker down there, even with our lights, like the blackness was thicker, heavier, like it pressed back against the beams and swallowed the edges of our vision. The stairs led to a corridor lined with rusted pipes and dripping condensation, but as we walked it became clear that this part of the factory hadn't been for machines. There were no tools, no signs, no windows, just blank metal walls, and that same carved pattern from upstairs, etched deeper now, more frantic. Something about the layout made no sense. The hall twisted in a way that shouldn't have been possible, turning back on itself but not leading to where we started. I checked my phone. No signal. Neither did anyone else. We should have turned around then. We should have run. But we didn't, because the further we went, the more we felt watched, not by something above or ahead, but from inside the walls, like the metal itself had eyes. Then the lights went out, all at once. No flicker, just gone, and in the pitch dark we heard breathing, not ours, too deep, too fast, and coming from behind us. Jake screamed first, a short, guttural sound that cut off into silence. Maya called his name, and her voice cracked mid-syllable before she dropped her light, and it shattered, leaving only Grant's and mine. We swung the beams around, but there was no Jake, just empty floor, wet footprints where he'd been standing, bare footprints, not his. We ran. We didn't agree to it. We didn't yell, we just turned and ran back the way we came, or thought we came, because the hallway didn't lead back to the stairs now. It opened into a wide chamber with no ceiling, just black rising into black and pillars stretching into the dark like bone spines. Every surface was covered in that same claw-marked pattern. Only now I saw what it was, rows and rows of faces, dozens, hundreds, etched into the walls, all screaming silently, eyes wide, mouths open, hands pressed into the steel as if frozen mid-beg for help. And behind us, something moved. I didn't look. I grabbed Grant and we bolted. I don't know how we got out. I don't remember the stairs. I just remember the cold, the absolute flesh-rotting cold, and a voice whispering something into my ear as I passed through the door that had been bent open. I don't really know why I went inside the old clinic that night. Maybe it was boredom, or the dare from Derek, or maybe it was because I'd passed it 100 times on my bike and something about it always pulled at me like gravity, eerie and quiet and half swallowed by weeds and rusted-out ambulances that hadn't moved since I was a kid. The County Emergency Medical Center had shut down after a series of administrative failures, which was local shorthand for a cover-up nobody wanted to dig too deep into. Rumors of bad surgeries, patients vanishing after being admitted, blood in the supply closets, and that one nurse who tried to set the building on fire before disappearing herself. They boarded it up and left it to rot, every window smashed out, every doorway sealed with plywood, and spray-painted warnings to stay out. But the back entrance near the collapsed loading dock still had a gap big enough to crawl through, which I did with a flashlight, a half-dead phone, and way more confidence than I deserved. The air hit me like a wall the second I got inside. Thick, wet cold in a way that felt wrong for July, and smelled like old chemicals and rotting meat hidden under a layer of disinfectant that had long since given up trying to mask it. The reception desk was still there, under a blanket of dust and shredded paperwork, every monitor screen cracked like something had punched through from the inside. There was a wheelchair tipped over near the hallway, and a dried trail beneath it, brownish red, flaky, leading deeper in. I told myself it was paint. I told myself that a lot that night. The silence inside wasn't total, but it was wrong, filled with tiny sounds that didn't line up with anything. Distant tapping like fingers on glass, the occasional soft hiss like breath through teeth, a wheeze from somewhere above me where no vents should have been. My flashlight started to flicker, so I shook it, trying not to panic as I passed room after room, all still full of equipment, IV poles, dust-covered beds, some with restraints still clipped to the rails, and one with the sheets pulled up over a lump that looked a little too human-shaped for comfort. I didn't check. I couldn't. I passed a mirror near one of the nurse stations, and my reflection was wrong. Not delayed or anything. It just looked off, like I wasn't standing the same way as me, and its mouth was just slightly open like it was about to say something. But I blinked, and it was normal again. I kept moving, deeper into the heart of the clinic, drawn toward the operating theatre at the end of the corridor, where the doors had been half ripped from their hinges and left dangling like broken arms. The walls back there were covered in what looked like peeling paint at first, but when I got close enough I saw it wasn't paint, it was pages, chart notes, patient records, glued to the drywall with what I swear was blood. Some of the files had photos stapled to them, faces I didn't recognize, all screaming, all scratched out with ink or something darker. There was a sound from inside the OR then, a low moan, wet and ragged, like a dying animal, and before I could stop myself, I stepped inside and aimed my light toward the source. The room was huge, circular, lit only by the dim moonlight pouring through the shattered skylight above. And in the center of the room was the operating table, and something was on it. Not a person, not exactly. It looked human, but wrong, stitched together like someone had tried to build a body from parts that didn't belong together, arms too long, head bulbous and twitching like it heard me and liked that I was close. I couldn't move. I wanted to, but my feet were rooted to the floor, and the thing lifted its head, and I swear to God it had no eyes, just skin stretched over sockets, and its mouth opened way too wide and let out this choked gurgle that sounded almost like my name. I turned and ran, my flashlight dying completely now, just my phone screen lighting the hall in short bursts as I sprinted back the way I came. But the hall wasn't the same anymore. Doors where there hadn't been before, stairs that led nowhere. And every time I turned a corner, the lights overhead flickered, just enough to show movement behind me, skittering shapes just out of view. I finally found the back exit again. Only it was sealed from the outside now. Sheet metal bolted across it like it had never been open, and I slammed my fists against it until blood slicked my palms, screaming for help as that wheezing breath came closer and closer until I turned and saw it again. Not the thing from the OR, but something else, taller, wearing what looked like a nurse's uniform stained black and green, its face a void of shifting static like a broken TV, and its fingers long, bone-white, twitching as it reached out to me. I passed out. I don't remember falling. But when I woke up, I was outside, the sky pale with morning and my phone dead and crusted with dried blood. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not Derek, not my parents, not even myself most days. I pretend it was just a nightmare. We were never supposed to be there. Not really. Not with the rusted-out fence or the no trespassing signs half scraped off like something had clawed at them from the inside. Not with the way the trees around the abandoned paper mill leaned away from it, like even nature didn't want anything to do with that place. But when you're 17 and bored in a town that feels like a dried-out lung, you do stupid things. And stupid was exactly what we were when Caleb dared us to go inside at dusk, just for a look. So I went, because I didn't want to look like a coward in front of him and Lex, and because I've always had a sick habit of wanting to know what's behind the locked doors people tell you not to open. The mill was a squat, hulking thing, all stained concrete and shattered windows like broken teeth, its old smokestacks piercing the sky like rusted needles, and as soon as we stepped through the bent-open service door, the temperature dropped like we'd walked into a different season, one that hadn't existed for decades, the air thick with the reek of mold, old pulp, and something sharper, metallic, like pennies sucked on too long. Caleb laughed too loud, his voice bouncing off the walls in that echo that never quite comes back right in dead places, and Lex flicked on her flashlight. The beam cutting across soggy insulation, abandoned safety signs, machinery half-eaten by rust, and shadows that somehow managed to hang too still as if holding their breath. We wandered deeper, past the old office where water-damaged ledgers lay open, like someone had been reading them yesterday, deeper into the press floor, where vast machines sat silent as tombs, their gears locked with a filmy grease that glistened when light passed over it like it was breathing. And I swear, God help me, I heard something move beneath one of the rollers, something wet dragging against concrete, but when I pointed my light, there was nothing, just scraps of rotted paper, and a rat skeleton picked so clean it looked placed, posed, like some tiny grotesque artwork. Caleb had climbed up onto a catwalk by then, shining his light down like he owned the place, yelling for us to come see something freaking wild, and we followed because that's what we always did. Followed Caleb. But the higher we got, the more wrong everything felt, like the walls were watching. Like the darkness wasn't just absence of light, but something active, listening, waiting. We reached the top, and there it was, a door marked Sub-Level 3, restricted, its paint flaked off in curls like dried skin, and the lock broken, twisted out of the frame like it had been wrenched from the inside. And of course Caleb went first, laughing that sharp bark he always used when he was scared but didn't want to show it, and then Lex, her flashlight beam jittering as she descended, and then me, last, because something in my gut told me that once we crossed that threshold, we were trespassing in a deeper way, not just into a building, but into something older and meaner than we understood. The stairs went down too far, winding in ways that made no sense, the air turning thick and warm and wet like an animal's breath. And the deeper we went, the more it smelled like rot and copper, until we hit the bottom and found a corridor lined with vats, massive industrial tanks built into the concrete, lids bolted shut, except one that gaped open like a mouth, its rim blackened, and something thick smeared along its edge. Caleb leaned over and shined his light in, said he couldn't see the bottom, said it looked like ink but smelled like death. And Lex laughed, but it was tight and hollow, and then, something splashed, a deep, wet plop from the tank like something shifting down there, and Caleb jumped back, dropped his flashlight, and we all froze because whatever was inside wasn't alone. There was breathing, wet and shallow, like lungs filled with fluid, and then a hand reached out. Not a normal hand, but something pale and papery, with too many joints and skin that crackled when it moved. And Caleb screamed and ran, and Lex ran, and I tried. But I slipped on something slick and went down hard, cracking my chin on the concrete. And when I looked back up, it was climbing out, slow and methodical, pulling its limbs free of that ink-black goo like birth in reverse. And its face, God, its face was just wet pulp shaped like a man, eyeless, mouthless, the suggestion of features pressed from within, like a thing trying to remember what it once was. I got up and ran, faster than I thought I could, the air filling with a low thrum that pulsed through the walls like a heartbeat. And I swear the machinery was moving, the old press rollers creaking to life, as if the building itself was waking up around us. And when I reached the top, Lex was there screaming that Caleb was gone. Just gone. No sound, no trace. And when we got outside, the sun was still setting, like no time had passed at all, like the mill had its own time, its own rules, and we never spoke of it again. Not really. Not out loud. I shouldn't have gone back there. Not after what happened years ago. Not after they shut the place down and left it to rot like a carcass no one wanted to deal with. But something about the old elementary school kept pulling at me, like a splinter under the skin you can't stop picking at. I was only 9 when the school closed down, just after that winter when the 5th grader disappeared, Jeremy Holt, last seen heading to the basement storage to grab folding chairs for an assembly. Never came back. Door was locked from the inside. They found his flashlight days later lying on the stairs, smashed and covered in something thick and black that soaked into the concrete, stained it forever. They searched every inch of that place with dogs and drones and drills, but Jeremy never turned up, just vanished, like he'd fallen through the floor of the world. They blamed it on faulty infrastructure, shut the whole building down for renovation, but no crews ever came, no bulldozers, no tarps, just silence, and now it squats at the end of Briar Hill like a dead memory, gutted and grey, windows gaping like sockets without eyes. I was 19 when I finally gave in to that itch and hopped the rusted fence just after dusk, alone, armed with a flashlight and the kind of false confidence only people with unresolved trauma seem to carry. The door gave way with a sound like breath held too long and suddenly released, and the smell inside was worse than I remembered. Mildew, sour paper, urine soaked into floor tiles, the lingering sharpness of some chemical that made my eyes sting and throat close up, The kind of air that hasn't moved in years. Balloons, their painted eyes cracked and warped into grimaces by time and moisture. I passed my old classroom, room 103, and almost didn't recognize it. The little desks overturned, blackboard warped and stained like it had bled ink, the alphabet border above it drooping in mildew-soaked strips like flayed skin. I kept walking, deeper into the guts of the building, where it got colder, where the air grew thick and wrong, like it didn't want me there, like it was pushing back against my presence with every step. I thought I heard footsteps behind me, quick light taps on linoleum, like a child running barefoot, but every time I turned, my flashlight revealed nothing, just more debris and shadows pressed up against the walls like they were listening. I should have turned around then, I know that now, but I didn't, because I'd come for the basement. I had to see it for myself, had to know what really happened to Jeremy, what had clawed its way into my dreams for a decade. The door to the stairwell was still there, still chained shut, but the chain had rusted through the middle and broke with a brittle snap when I tugged it, and the door creaked open to reveal stairs that plunged down into a darkness so complete it felt like weight. My light barely made a dent in it, and the deeper I went, the louder the building seemed to breathe, the walls pulsing with groans and creaks and something else, a wet whispering like lips brushing against a microphone too close. When I hit the bottom, the air was warm and close, like an attic in summer, but it stank of rot and metal and something else, something sharp and sweet like sugar left to spoil. The storage room at the end of the hall was open now, its door splintered and warped, and inside there was a circle burned into the floor, rough and blackened, edges still curled like whatever made it had been alive and hot and angry, and I swear, God, I swear. I saw handprints on the walls, small ones, children's hands pressed into the concrete like the walls had tried to swallow them. I turned to leave, panic surging up my throat like bile when I heard it, a faint giggle, high and breathy, echoing down the hallway behind me, and I turned the light, and there he was, Jeremy, or something that looked like Jeremy, standing at the far end of the corridor in his old striped hoodie, head tilted, eyes too wide, smile too big, his feet not quite touching the ground, just hovering slightly off the floor like a balloon on a string. And he lifted his arm, slow, jerky like a puppet, and pointed at me and said, "You came back." And my legs wouldn't move, my body locked in place as he started drifting toward me, his mouth widening until it cracked the sides of his cheeks, his teeth too many, too sharp, too clean for something that had been missing for 10 years. I finally broke, ran up those stairs so fast I nearly tripped twice, smashed through the door, ran out into the night gasping, the cold air hitting my lungs like ice. But as I reached the fence, I looked back and saw the stairwell door slowly swing shut on its own, and behind the glass of room 103, I saw a dozen small faces staring out, eyes black and wet like spilled ink, watching me, memorizing me, as if they knew I'd be back someday, because things like that don't let go, they just wait, patiently. I rented the place for quiet, nothing more. A weekend away from the noise of the city, the burnout of a brutal work schedule, and the suffocating pressure of everything that had started to feel too loud in my head. The listing made it look like a dream, secluded cabin-style home tucked into a wooded property just north of Asheville, modern interior, fireplace, wrap-around porch. And something about it just felt right. The photos had that sun-washed golden tone that makes your skin itch with the need for peace. So I booked it without a second thought. Drove up on a fog-choked Friday evening, late autumn air crisp enough to bite, and the trees still clutching the last of their dying red leaves. The driveway was longer than expected, a rutted dirt path cutting deep into the woods, twisting and narrowing until it opened into a small clearing, where the house sat squatting under the shadows of towering pines. It looked exactly like the pictures, only quieter, too quiet, the kind of silence that pressed in on you like water. And I shrugged it off, grabbed my bags, and unlocked the door with the code sent by the host, who never responded to my follow-up questions about the location. Just a single message 2 days before check-in that read, "Enjoy the stillness, it remembers everything." I didn't get it at the time, didn't even think about it until later, until it was too late. The house itself was fine, clean, smelled faintly of cedar and bleach, a little cold but charming, with big windows and shelves of books that hadn't been touched in years. But it was during the second day, when I was exploring the edge of the property, that I saw it through the trees. Just a sliver at first, a dark corner jutting up from the underbrush, and curiosity pulled me toward it, like a hook in the ribs. I pushed through low branches and thorns until I stood in front of it. A building, stone and wood, long abandoned, roof half collapsed, doorway yawning open like a scream, the structure completely hidden from the house unless you knew where to look, and it didn't match the Airbnb description, wasn't mentioned in any of the welcome materials, not on any map I could find on my phone. It looked like an old chapel maybe, or a lodge, but something about it felt wrong, like it had no business still standing, like it had been left here instead of built, and the air around it was warmer than the rest of the woods, humid and still, with a heavy taste of iron and wet leaves. I should have walked away, should have turned around right then and gone back inside and locked the doors, but something pulled at me, a kind of pressure behind the eyes, and I stepped through the door, flashlight in hand, and the beam cut across dust motes, so thick it looked like smoke, illuminating broken pews, a cracked stone floor, sagging beams wrapped in ivy and spider webs, and something else, carvings on the walls, deep gouges like someone had clawed shapes into the stone with fingernails or worse, shapes that didn't look like anything I recognized, loops and jagged spirals that twisted if you stared too long. I moved deeper, the smell growing stronger like old blood and mold and something else, sweet and rotten like decaying fruit, and then I heard the whisper. Not words, just a breath, a presence close enough that the hairs on my neck stood up and my mouth went dry, and I turned toward the sound and saw a figure in the corner, not moving, just crouched in the shadows, arms too long, knees bent wrong, head tilted like it was listening too closely. I couldn't see its face. My light flickered every time I tried, but I felt it looking at me, recognized the weight of it in my chest like drowning, and I ran, bolted out of that place without thinking, branches whipping my face as I tore through the woods back to the house, slamming the door behind me, heart in my throat, lungs burning, and I told myself it was a squatter or an animal or just my brain playing tricks, but none of those things explain what happened that night, because at 3:17 a.m. I woke up to the sound of footsteps above me, heavy, measured, not pacing but approaching, and there was no second floor. The ceiling creaked like something massive was moving across it, and when I finally worked up the nerve to grab the flashlight and look outside, I saw footprints in the frost on the porch, bare human feet, long toes, dragging lines behind them like claws, and they circled the house again and again and again, disappearing into the woods in the direction of that building. I left at dawn, left my clothes, food, everything, drove until I saw highway signs, and didn't stop until I hit Charlotte. I told the host what I saw, and they never replied. The listing vanished a day later, and now weeks have passed, and I still can't sleep. Because some nights I hear it again, just outside my window where no one should be. Soft, dragging steps, whispers through the glass. And I dream of that place, of the carved walls and the smell and that thing in the corner waiting. And when I wake up, I can taste the air from that room on my tongue, wet, coppery, and thick. I was 13 the first time I saw something I still refused to believe was real. But I know what I saw, and I know what I heard, and I know that something followed me home that night, even if it never stepped inside the house. It stayed outside, silent, waiting, like it knew I'd never tell anyone, and it had all the time in the world to watch me rot with fear. I grew up in the kind of neighborhood where old buildings got abandoned faster than they got repaired, and at the edge of our block there was this massive apartment complex, 8 stories high, crumbling at the edges like a carcass left to the elements, windows black and gutted, floors sagging like wet cardboard. And rumor had it some squatters died there during a fire in the 90s, though no one could ever agree on how many or what floor it started on. The place just looked wrong, like it was leaning in on itself, like it wanted to be forgotten. The only people who ever went inside were junkies or dare-happy teenagers who thought they were invincible, until they came out pale, shaking, or never came out at all. I didn't go in on a dare, or because someone told me to. I went in because I was stupid, bored, and obsessed with urban exploration videos, and wanted to make my own channel. So I took my mom's old camcorder and told her I was staying the night at Jason's house, then biked over just before sunset. I remember how the air changed the second I stepped past the rusted gate, heavier, like the building was exhaling centuries of dust and regret. My sneakers crunched over broken glass and cigarette butts as I pushed open the lobby door, which screamed like it hadn't moved in a decade. The whole place smelled like wet plaster, mildew, and something underneath it all, thick and metallic, sickly sweet, like rotting meat dressed in cologne. I kept filming, kept whispering commentary, like I was narrating a Discovery Channel special to calm myself down, but it didn't help. The light from my flashlight bounced erratically off broken mirrors and graffiti-smeared walls. The echoes of my own footsteps started to sound like someone else's pacing just a few steps behind, and when I'd stop, they'd stop, but always a fraction of a second too late. I told myself it was just acoustics, old walls playing tricks, until I saw the elevator doors on the far wall jerk open about an inch before slamming shut again without a sound. I didn't imagine that. I know I didn't. I should have left then, should have bolted right through the lobby and never looked back. But I kept thinking it was some mechanical glitch, some leftover charge from God knows when, so I took the stairs instead, figuring I'd film a few floors and head out with something to show for it. The stairwell was even darker, the kind of dark that swallowed your breath, and as I climbed I started noticing things. Scratches on the walls at knee height, like someone was dragged or something was crawling. And then the whispers started, not words exactly, but tones, like someone humming under their breath just around the corner, never loud, never clear, just there. And every time I turned to look, it stopped. Dead silence until I moved again. 4th floor was worse. The air was so cold it stung, and every door in the hallway was wide open like mouths yawning into voids, and I swear to God, I heard crying coming from one of them, soft, wet, like someone whispering sobs into a pillow. I should have gone back down, but I kept going, drawn to it, like I wasn't in control anymore. I turned into that apartment, the one with the crying, and it was pitch black inside, smelled stronger, like copper and mold, and in the center of the living room was a pile of children's shoes, dozens of them, old and crumbling, some half burnt, arranged in a perfect circle around what looked like a small plastic chair. I don't remember walking in. I just remember being there. And then the crying stopped instantly, and I felt it standing behind me. No sound, just that sense, like static crawling up your spine, like every hair on your neck snapping to attention. I turned slowly, camera still rolling, and saw nothing. But I felt it, close, too close, closer than breath. and then I heard it whisper, not into my ears but into my mind, a voice dry and cracked like leaves in a fire. "You shouldn't be here." I bolted, dropped the camera, sprinted down the hallway, down the stairs, 2 steps at a time, tripped on the second floor, busted my lip, kept running, barely noticed the blood, because something was following me, not running, but crawling. I could hear the dragging limbs, wet and slow, scraping behind me, and every step I took I felt it closer, like it was letting me run just to enjoy the fear. I didn't stop until I was outside, collapsed on the sidewalk and screamed until a passing couple found me and called my parents. I never told anyone the full story, just said I got scared and fell, and my mom grounded me for a month. But that night I saw it again, outside my window, perched on the fire escape, silhouette hunched and twitching, its head too wide, arms too long, fingers tapping the glass. We found the house by accident, or maybe it found us. I don't know anymore, but I do know that none of us were ever the same after that day. Not me, not Eric, not Devin. And I don't care what anyone says about trauma or hallucinations or mass hysteria, because what we saw in that place wasn't human, and it wasn't meant to be seen by anyone still breathing. It was something ancient, something waiting, and we woke it up. We were just 3 dumb teenagers looking for something creepy to post about online. The usual abandoned house exploration you see in viral TikToks and YouTube shorts. Nothing special. Just that rotting 3-story Victorian outside of town, half hidden behind trees, its roof caved in at one side, and windows boarded up like it was trying to keep something inside, not out. The story was that some guy went nuts and killed his whole family there in the 70s, then disappeared into the walls or something. I didn't believe it. None of us did. But we brought flashlights and gloves and even a crowbar just in case, and we filmed everything because that's what you do now, right? You document the horror to make it real to other people, even if it never feels real to you. Eric was the one who found the side entrance, half buried under leaves and warped planks, and Devin pried it open while I filmed, snickering and talking shit to keep the nerves at bay. But once we stepped inside, the air changed like walking underwater, suffocating and thick and stale like every breath was borrowed from a grave. The floor creaked with every step. But it was more than that. It felt like the house was listening, like it recognized us, like it was remembering how we smelled, and the deeper we went, the worse it got. Black mold in the corners like veins, wallpaper peeling in long strips like skin, painted family portraits slashed down the center or turned to face the wall as if they couldn't bear to watch what had happened in their own rooms. We should have left right then, but Devin was obsessed with getting a shot of the basement. Said he heard that's where the guy chopped them up or did his rituals or whatever bullshit story had infected the internet. And of course Eric agreed, because peer pressure's stronger than common sense at 17. So down we went, one flashlight between us, since the others had started to flicker like they were losing power, even though we'd just replaced the batteries. The basement door was swollen with moisture and groaned, open, slow and loud, like it was screaming in protest, and what hit us first wasn't the cold or the dark, but the smell. Raw, feral, like something between burnt hair and meat gone sour, not rot exactly, but sickness, something you could taste in your teeth and behind your eyes. The stairs groaned with each step down, slick with mold, and about halfway I swear I heard something whisper my name, not loud, not from behind me, but from inside me, like a memory I never had. I stopped, spun around, accused the guys of messing with me, but they both swore they hadn't spoken, and for once I believed them because their faces were pale and tight and scared, even Devin, who never backed down from anything. We hit the bottom and shined the light around. Dirt floor, rotted wooden shelves, a stained mattress curled in the corner like a dead animal, and writing on the walls in something too dark to be old paint, words in a language none of us recognized, twisting and looping and crawling toward the ceiling like veins or roots. Then Eric screamed, not a scared scream, a hurt scream, and dropped to his knees, holding his shoulder, saying something grabbed him, something cold and fast and inside, and I saw the bruise blooming under his collar, a perfect handprint with too many fingers. And then the flashlight died. Nothing but black, nothing but our breaths and the sound of something wet moving in the dark, a slither or shuffle or maybe a crawl. I don't know. I was too scared to move, to speak, to even think straight. But then Devin lit his lighter, and in that tiny orange flame, we saw it. Not a man, not a creature, just a shape, black and long and sharp and wrong, its limbs bending in directions that hurt the eyes, and its face, or where the face should have been, was just a smooth patch of skin that rippled like water when it breathed. We didn't scream. We couldn't. It was like the sound got stuck in our throats, the same way the air felt too thick to swallow, and it moved toward us slowly, like it had all the time in the world and knew we didn't. Devon swung the crowbar, but it passed through the thing, like it wasn't there, and he screamed and collapsed, his mouth hanging open. But no sound coming out, eyes wide and glassy like something had emptied him from the inside. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran, up the stairs, through the house, out the door, never looking back, not even when I heard Eric's footsteps behind me falter and stop like he'd been grabbed, or maybe like he'd decided not to leave. I didn't stop running until I was on the road, and even then I didn't look back because I knew if I did, it would be there.
If you enjoyed the journey and survived it, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who sleeps too easily, and subscribe for more original horror stories delivered straight into your nightmares. And if you have a true tale or twisted idea you'd like me to bring to life, leave it in the comments below. I read them all. Some of my favorite stories come from minds just like yours. And so the final candle is burned out, but some stories never really end. They wait in the corners of your mind, and now so must you. You have heard the incantations of the demised, the shadows sworn to secrecy. But what slipped through, what followed you back into the light, if these stories stirred something inside you, if they made you hesitate before turning off the lights, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because next time, we're going deeper. So rest while you can, because next time the story just might be about you.